Hello, everybody! Today we are continuing our journey through the awesome history of Star Wars modding. Joining me for this reason is Yeos, a longtime player and modder of Star Wars Battlefront II. Hello there, how are you doing?
Hey, thanks for having me and for reaching out. As every chance I get to speak about my hobbies, I'll take it. Thanks for having me on board.
You're more than welcome. I love hearing all your stories and what basically brings you into the gaming world.
Yeah. For as long as I can remember, I've always liked Star Wars. I remember watching Empire Strikes Back on a trip. My dad put it on for us. We were sitting in the back of a minivan, and I remember watching the walkers appear on the first time on Hoth, and I was like, this is incredible. And ever since that moment, I've really liked Star Wars. And of course, with liking Star Wars comes liking all the games and everything that was released with it. And Battlefront 2 has been from 2005, of course, has been one of the closest games to my heart. I think it's fantastic. And I've been playing it for a couple of years now. I didn't get to play it on release, actually, a little bit later on, but I'm glad that I found it when I did.
And was it your first Star Wars game or did you play something else?
I mean, pretty much it's been my main Star Wars game. I also remember the first time I played Battlefront. It was on a PS2, and we were at a friend's house, and he had it hooked up, and he goes, "Hey, come check this out." And I remember starting and spawning as a rebel soldier on Hoth, getting on one of the snow speeders, and then fighting the walkers, just like in the movie that my dad first showed me all those years ago. And from that moment, I fell in love with the game. I knew it had a special place in my heart. But other than that, I mean, I've really dabbled in just kind of briefly touching some of the other games, like The Force Unleashed and some of the new Battlefront games as well. But since I don't have a console, surprisingly, I haven't played a lot of the newer games like the Fallen Order series, Jedi Fallen Order. I know the story and everything because I think it looks awesome, but I personally haven't played it. Maybe I'll check it out one day.
I can definitely recommend it. It's really, really nice. But yeah, I wonder how did you get into modding? What brought you basically the idea to mod a game?
So when I first, something that drew me to the game a lot, because I had it on the original Xbox at first, and it was really fun. And then later, probably like 6 years ago, 7 years ago, I decided to purchase the game on Steam and have it on a PC instance. And I saw that you can mod it to any extent, and there's essentially a ton of incredible mods made for the game. So like by the time I had purchased it and started playing Battlefront 3 Legacy, Clone Wars Extended, Clone Wars Revised, Battles of the Clone Wars, a ton of these mods, BK2's post Endor era mod were already released. And so, I mean, I was like, I basically can not only play the game I love, but I can play all this extended DLCs for free. I was like, this is fantastic. I need to get into it. So there's a ton you can do and a ton of famous modders that, have really carried the community and, have kept this game alive for 19, 20 years. And during that time, one of these modders, his name is Jedi Jack. He's known for his Galactic Conquest mods. He made a mod called Heroes of the Galaxy. Essentially, what this mod does is it takes a bunch of custom heroes and it randomly rotates through them so that you can play as a ton of characters from the expanded universe, the shows, the other movies like Solo and Rogue One. And one of the features that he added was that somebody, like such as myself, you, whoever, could add in their own heroes if they just learned a little bit of how to mod, how to code, how to create a character. And that was the first time that I was like, okay, I want to use this mod and essentially make my own Jedi heroes to fight alongside the Grand Army of the Republic. And that was my first exposure to it. I reached out to Jedi Jack. He gave me some pointers, some tutorials as to like where to go, kind of how to start. And at first, I was modding personally just for myself, and eventually, as I got more into it, started seeing what I could actually do. Then I became and found a ton of great assets made by other great modders, and then just kind of eventually things just became what they were. And I just continued forward, and got to projects a little bit more polished so that they could be released to people for people to play. Because when you're modding personally, it doesn't really matter, if this skin's slightly off or that thing's like, not as perfect as it could be. But when you're releasing it to everybody, you kind of have to knock out some of those finer details just to make it a more holistic and complete experience for the players.
Yeah, you definitely want to present something which meets a quality standard, your personal quality standard. Yeah, totally understand that. Well, I would say outside of the modding community, not so many fans know about Battlefront II Expanded Conflicts. Can you give me a short summary?
Of course. So as I got involved into the projects that I liked, and as I was seeing my skill level and what I could implement, I saw that many, many, many of the projects centered around Clone Wars era content, which is, it's cool because, I mean, that's the most popular, it's the most well known, it's the most in terms of like media, and it's also what I grew up as well. So I've really enjoyed a lot of those mods, but sometimes it can get a little oversaturated with that type of content. And I thought if I can kind of bring something new to the table or improve on something that's already happened, maybe it'll gain a little bit more traction and it can be something that is different outside of what, people have already done. And so, growing up, I would watch the trailers made by BioWare for the Old Republic MMO RPG game. I personally have never played it or the KOTOR games, Knights of the Old Republic. But I think the era is super, super neat. All the lore surrounding it is really cool. And, I would watch videos about the formation and how the conflict started and everything. So I wanted to center my projects kind of around this idea of battles and eras outside of the main saga of Star Wars, right? So right now, Expanded Conflicts consists of Reign of the Old Republic. So that mod contains two eras: the Great Galactic War, which is from the based on the Old Republic MMORPG game, and then KOTOR, which is Knights of the Old Republic, and this is the Jedi Civil War era, and that's based on a different game. And so a project that's in the works, for example, now is Reign of the New Republic, right? Which is still outside of that main saga, but it is, instead of being before the timeline, it is after, right? Maybe when Luke Skywalker has his Jedi Order kind of thing. Touching on eras and mods that don't have as much content out there, right? There are a good amount of good Old Republic mods that I actually drew inspiration from, but I wanted to expand and kind of keep doing something more grand, quote unquote, if that makes sense, because those projects are no longer being updated. And similarly with the era after Endor, right? BK2 modders post Endor era is fantastic. I love that mod a lot. And I think there's also one called the Thrawn trilogy, which is another one that's set in the post Endor era. But those are the only two that I can think of that have been made like that, right? So I love kind of adding to that experience of something new, something different. And so Expanded Conflicts is just a place where I house all of my projects that are kind of just custom eras where I take ideas and themes and I'm inspired by medium that has already been put out there, but I kind of add my own twist to it, my own liking. I like certain characters or certain aspects, or I wanted to make sure in the Old Republic that the Jedi characters were very apparent because I like playing as them, so I spent a lot of time focused on them. Yeah, but that's what it is, essentially just a group of mods centered around the main saga.
I saw in Mod Database that your earliest entry is a version called 2.0 from 2023.
Mhm.
When did you really start developing this mod? Can you remember the exact date?
Yeah, of course. So actually, when I first published version one, I didn't even have a ModDB page set up. I literally just posted a file, and that was back in August of 2023. That was version one. I think I archived it. I'm sure you're still able to find it, but I wanted to. I put everything together probably for a couple months before that, right? A lot of it was I really just grabbed the models and the skins. And at first it was, adding these eras, these classes, and it evolved over time, right? So I don't know if I could tell you like when I exactly started developing it, because I would probably say once modding, technically I started developing it. Because some of those earliest Jedi characters that I created eventually made it into the mod all this time later. But I really focused, once I found the necessary assets, all I really did was assign those assets to the different units. And at first, that first version didn't even have custom weapons. Like I was straight up just adding custom units and like custom sound effects and colors and Jedi units. So then I got a decent amount of feedback from the community. A lot of it was pretty positive, but a lot of people were, I didn't have custom weapon models and stuff like that. And it honestly got a lot more traction than I thought that it was going to get. And so as I continued to improve it, I finally was able to reach a newer version, a version 2 in November, right? So as soon as version 1 was released, I collected all this impact or all this feedback and input, and I took all of that, and in November I went ahead and released an updated version, with more, I think it was more character models and more features. And as things kept going, for my vision of it, I wanted to do, I wanted to add vehicles and all the and galactic conquest, for example, space. So I ran into some complications, right? Because it's only me. I'm the only one doing everything. So it's kind of hard to learn and kind of tackle all of the different aspects because there's a lot that goes into it. But for example, I contacted Jedi Jack, shortly after releasing that version too, and I was like, "Hey, I would love for my mod to have a galactic conquest. Do you think you could help me out or kind of show me how to do it?" And he was like, "I would love to work with you." And we've been collaborating ever since. And we've both learned a lot from each other. A lot of what was implemented was through certain tricks that he taught me, such as the vehicles and, some of those giant space frigates on ground maps. He was able to kind of show me some tricks that he has used in his mods before, which is fantastic. And so through him, I was able to implement vehicles, starfighters, a space map, galactic conquest, right? And so it was growing to get to the vision that I initially had for it, back in August of 2023. And together, right, we got to this point. It had been ready for a while. Version 3 had been ready for a while, but we both have our own lives, and the era mod section was done, but he wasn't quite finished yet with the Galactic Conquest. So we had to hold back and kind of push that release date a little bit further back as we were doing testing and making sure everything worked because it was just me and him. And the mod adds a decent amount of content with a decent amount of custom maps. So testing all of that with just us took a little bit of time.
I can imagine, especially as a new beginner, the first steps into the modding world can be frightening.
Right.
Did you find a lot of documentations? How easy is it basically for a beginner to start modding in Battlefront 2?
Yeah, so what's nice is that the game, has been released for 20, 19 years, and that means that the mod tools and all the assets used to build the game were released to the public way back then. I think it was a year or two after release. And that means that people have been modding the game ever since then, right? So there's a ton of information out there. It's had its peaks, it's had its ups and downs. Its popularity grows or declines throughout the years. But they've built a great community, right? So I'm part of I think it's a website called Game Toast. And this is where a lot of the assets and tutorials are housed. The website hasn't had maintenance in years. So I really use it to kind of find links to places, certain models, certain assets. But then along with that, there's also a Game Toast Discord server where a lot of the modders in that community is currently active, even as we speak right now, and people will share their work and kind of what's going on. And sometimes when I hit a stump and I'm not too sure how to keep moving forward, I will just reach out in that server, right? And just say, hey, I'm trying to do this or I'm trying to do that. Is it possible? Is it not possible? Can somebody help me out? And everybody is super helpful. They're very nice. It can be a little bit of a roadblock to kind of tackle some of these more specific bugs that happen when implementing certain features. But what's nice is that there are tutorials out there. I know on the Game Toast, that was a good place to start. I also know somebody else made a YouTube video about how to add in custom units. I think also how to make a map. So there's resources out there to at least get you started, which I think is probably the hardest part, just learning how everything works, how the files talk to each other, how you need to properly compile, which is called munging for Battlefront, which is where you take all the files and essentially compact them into a playable file. All of that stuff, right? At first you kind of need to learn how everything works. And then once you kind of have that basis, you gotta specifically tackle certain parts of the game because you can really mod everything, right? And there's a lot you can do. So, for example, right now I know how to implement air mods. I know how to do side mods. I can implement, vehicles, starfighters, stuff like that. But I have no idea how to make a map, for example. I would be unable to do that. I know Reign of the Old Republic, the space maps currently use stock capital ships, right? So I think it's the Mon Calamari cruiser and the Star Destroyer, the Alliance versus Empire maps, because if we would have wanted to implement custom frigates, we would have had to implement a custom map. And that's just out of my scope. I don't know how to do that, right? So there's a lot of different stuff you can do with the game, and I think the main thing will be, all right, what do you really want to implement, and then kind of start learning and taking the path to figure out what those specific areas are, because you really can change a lot.
So I imagine that's currently also your biggest problem, that you are still learning the mapping tools.
Yeah, definitely. Like for me as a professional job, I am a data scientist. So I'm pretty exposed to programming and code and compiling. So all of that isn't really new to me, which has, of course, made it much, much easier for me to understand. But because you can change so much, like I think maybe it'll be cool to tackle creating a custom map, for example. But I think for now, I'll probably stick with side mods and era mods. And then, if my curiosity sparks again, or if I have some sort of feeling, I'll try to tackle a custom map. But it's really about narrowing down that scope because it's very vast, and we're very fortunate to have all the assets and everything used to build the game was given to us. So people have made really, really incredible stuff.
You just, of course, mentioned that you have problems with mapping. How about modeling, creating new starfighters, for example, or weapons? How is this for you?
So great question. That's also an area that I have not touched upon at all. So pretty much every single model and not every skin, but every model has been already made by another talented modder. It was one of those things where I've definitely thought about converting models or learning how to do that. But that, again, it's a whole nother scope, and I didn't want to devote a lot of time to that when I was already like working on projects that already use the fantastic assets that are already out there. And if people are talented enough to do those other tasks, maybe I'll just reach out to them. I know a modder, his name is Jacker1112. I use some of his models that he converted, and he has tutorials on how to port models from JKA, for example. So I've thought about it, but since he saw that I use some of his models in my air mod, he reached out to me and he said, "Hey, if you ever need any models, just let me know, and we can talk about if it's possible to port them over." So it's been nice to have gotten that support, right? So that I don't have to really do everything myself. Something that I have touched though is I haven't gotten into modeling at all, but I have messed around with the textures, right? So each model file is a .msh. I think I don't know what it stands for, but each of those files are associated with a tagra file, which is a texture file, almost like an image. And I have gone in and I have opened that up, and essentially you just have to go and open a picture editing software like GIMP, and you can go in and change and manipulate the colors or the how the textures look, and you will receive a completely different looking model, quote unquote, right? You just change the textures, but it looks like a completely different model. So I have touched that upon that, so I can make different colored skins for the units, right? Or for example, I'm working on a personal Clone Wars mod, and I've been working on implementing a skin changer for that. And if I'm successful, well, I have been successful, but if I'm successful enough to the point where people like it and stuff, and it's functional and nobody breaks it, then I could potentially go back to my old Republic mod and implement a skin changer into that as well. But like you said, I'm still learning. I'm still a pretty decently new modder compared to some of these other modders like Teamcom, who has been he was part of a conversion pack team, which was released all the way back, I think, in like 2008, right? So he's been modding the game for a long time. So compared to some of those other guys, I'm the new kid. I'm the new student.
But I would say it's always good to have fresh blood in the community, and yeah, you basically bring something new.
No, yeah, I think it's always a good mixture to have your veterans, right? People that know what's up, people that know what works and what doesn't. And like you said, get a fresh pair of eyes on it, maybe some new ideas, maybe a different vision, something that hasn't been done yet. And that's what I've been hoping that I've been bringing to the community. They've given me so many amazing mods. I kind of wanted to do the same, provide one for everyone to play and to enjoy, to have fun, to be immersed into a universe outside of our own.
I noticed you edited so many different classes and even vehicles I never have seen. What would you say is your favorite?
Hmm. I mean, it all started because I wanted to implement Jedi units. So those were the first units that were done. And I mean, some people have made some fantastic assets. So that was also something that I had to learn, was people would release animations unmunged, right? So uncompiled. So it'd be just the files, right? So say I want to take the attack from Mace Windu and mix it with some of the attacks from Luke. And so I compiled a ton of these different attack animations and idle animations, block animations. And I kind of just made something that I thought was, my favorite way of playing these units. And as I kept going and learning, I feel like I added some pretty cool aspects to these force units, right? Because I really wanted them to stand out, to have that feeling of extra power over your standard trooper, right? So, for example, all the force powers on these units are chargeable, right? So you can hold down your secondary attack button when you're using force push, for example, and you can charge it. If you wait a little bit, it'll do a force wave instead of just pushing a couple of the units in front of you.
Oh, interesting.
I just wanted to make it feel like you could be more powerful, right? So every force unit as well has a secondary air attack animation, right? So most of them, if you just hit the attack while you're in the air, you'll do that like front flip attack, the stock Luke air attack, which I think is the best air attack out of the stock ones. So I use that one. But if you hit block while you're in the air, your character will actually do a ground smash, right? So they will, and I think that was a released asset by Ryan Hank, very talented modder. He's done a ton of cool stuff. And so I've always thought that's been so cool. So I gave that to all the force units as well. I was like, if we can add that, let's definitely add that in. Right. So if you jump in the air and hit block, your character will come down and do a ground smash, and it'll send all the units around them flying. It won't really do any damage to them at all, but it'll tumble them all over. And sometimes I use that to get out of, like, I guess, quote unquote tricky situations when I'm fighting. But it was super fun to mess around with all those animations. I went ahead and added the DLC Xbox Kit Fisto punch animations. So if you hit your primary attack, secondary attack, and then primary again twice, your character will actually do two punches and then like a roundhouse kick. And I think if you attack while you're crouched as well, he'll also do that, or they'll also do that. Just like small stuff like that, I think is like super cool. When I saw that Kit Fisto could do that, I was like, I wish they could all do that, little hand-to-hand combat. And, the most recent feature that I added with them was a lightsaber toggle, right? So if you crouch twice, your character will deactivate their lightsaber or lightsabers because some of them have multiple blades. And if you hit the attack button once, you'll ignite it again. So another small little implementation that I haven't really seen any mods do something like that where you can turn off your sabers.
Yeah, definitely sounds very interesting. Can't wait to try those combinations. I guess since you're very new in the modding area, it's a little bit hard for you to answer this question. If you already discovered a feature or an item you wished you would include but couldn't.
Let me think about that. I feel like we've definitely run into some complications because, for example, on the back end of things, when I was working with Jedi Jack on Galactic Conquest, all of the matches had to have the same team names, as in like Republic versus Empire. But the way that I was implementing vehicles, so like I said, I hadn't made any custom maps. So the vehicles being added were actually all done through clever scripting tricks, right? So I would just take a vehicle name, like my custom vehicle name, rename it to whatever vehicle was loaded in, and then the game would load in my custom vehicle with like the stock name, for example. But when we were doing Republic versus Empire, sometimes the Republic and the Empire would spawn on the same side, which means that that scripting method wouldn't work. Right. So in the Galactic Conquest, maybe some maps don't have vehicles because we had to work around that in order to fully implement it. Things like them. For the space map, for example, the frigates are added in as objects, right? Because there's a lot of extra work that has to be done in order to time it and to connect them to specific events like explosions or having them have auto turrets on them. You have to do a ton of extra stuff. And I wasn't really too sure how to implement that without having to learn how to make a whole new world. And so I just added them in as objects, and therefore we lost like that frigate space ability, right? So you can still destroy them and everything, but it won't give you any points, which is kind of a bummer. And we were trying to figure out how to correctly go around that, and we just couldn't do it without, making a custom world. Same thing with the capital ships, like they're just the stock ones now. Like I really wish that we could implement fully custom ones to have like the players be fully immersed in the era. But then again, right, there's certain limitations, and I don't know if there's any even assets for those capital ships available. I know they've been made before, but I don't know if they've been released publicly. And that's also been a big driving force holding us back is that right, I can only use stuff that has been released publicly. So there's been a lot of work in other mods made by other people, which would be fantastic for my mod, right? For example, I think one of the older public mods, released way back in like 2016, they had a specific droid model, like a war droid model that was like a droidica, and I really wanted to diversify my units and kind of use something like that. But no, that asset was never released by anybody else. It's exclusive to that mod. And so those are kind of some things that I'm like, it kind of bums me out. Like I really wish I had a very specific model or instance or implementation because I know somebody made a Old Republic space map, like a standalone space map, but I didn't just want to add compatibility or use their stuff without reaching out to them or asking if it was okay, or I didn't want to be rude by any means necessary. So there are some things that I wish I could implement that I just cannot at the moment. For example, the units are, at least for the Republic, it rotates through a randomizer, because there's a lot of cool units, and I didn't want to have just one unit per map because there's a lot of their units that I liked and I wanted to be able to try different ones. So it's just randomized for now, which isn't my favorite, but I wanted people to be able to play all the units on all the maps and kind of give that sense of new gameplay, right? Because if you play the same match twice, not only are the Republic units randomized, but for example, the Force units, because you get two for the Republic and for the Empire, those will be random as well, and there'll be different animations every time. So that way, whenever you play the same match over and over again, hopefully there will be some new component, right? Because there's probably 50 Jedi and Sith characters all together. They don't all have unique animations, but there's a decent amount. I think there's like six or seven unique Jedi animations. And so for the Republic troopers, I'm hoping to implement a skin changer, right? So it's not randomized. I like the randomized Jedi units to give that sense of freshness, but with the troopers, I really wish that we could pick, that I would allow the user to be able to pick them. But I'm in the works of that now. It's a little bit harder because you got to mess with some code that is scripting. It's more logic based, and it's not as simple as replacing a couple values, which is how most of the era mod works. And it has to be a bit more custom to your specific implementation. And that's something that I'm looking forward to implementing, though, if I do get to that point. I mean, I'm pretty happy with the release that I have it now, but if things come up where there are solutions, to some of these problems, or somebody can help me implement something, I'll definitely look into it.
Well, that's quite a huge number of different Force users you included. Very impressive there.
Yeah, it was my favorite, or it's the reason I started modding, just because I liked the Jedi units and I wanted to make them a little bit more powerful. I decreased their health, right? But I certainly enjoyed that aspect, I think, the most, probably.
I can totally relate to that. You also spoke about the future. What would you say is the future of the project, at least in the next few months?
Yeah. So I think for now, I mean, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out, right? Based compared to version one, this latest version has all the different units, a ton of different classes, right? Each unique to their specific weapon layout and maybe, animations and kind of the secondary deployables that they have as well. But as people play with it, I'll probably do minor updates here and there just to fix a couple bugs. If people say a certain thing with Galactic Conquest isn't working, or if there's anything game breaking, that's probably what will be updated. But because I'm pretty happy with how things are so far, I think I'm going to shift focus from this era to some other projects. This doesn't mean it's like completely finished, because if things come up that can make it better, I will definitely look into implementing them. But I think for now, since it's been much more flushed out, I think I want to tackle the reign of the New Republic era and kind of see what the capabilities are with that. I'm going to try to translate all my skills and everything that I had for the Old Republic era and implement it for this New Republic. And alongside that, I'm working on it was a personal project, a personal Clone Wars era project. But like I said, there's already a lot of Clone Wars era content for the game. So I don't know if I'll release that publicly. Maybe I'll just release it in my server. I'm not too sure there. I want to make sure that I'm building that era to my liking and kind of like how I like to play and what I wanted to see out of the original game slash, a combination of all my favorite parts of all these other mods. And so hopefully I'm able to make it unique enough that either A stands out from the rest or, it's just a different style of gameplay, kind of drawing from all the different aspects that I like. Like it's a Clone Wars mod, but the Jedi units, have my unique animations, for example. Or, it has a working skin changer. Right now I have a working skin changer with, I think, around 12 legions, clone legions, which is pretty exciting. I've been working on that for a little bit, trying to mess around with what I can add, and I don't know, maybe I'll be releasing something like that down the line.
I see there's a bright future for your mods. Can't wait for it. Of course, there are also other Battlefront games, and yeah, I would like to know what are your thoughts about them.
Yeah, I have played Battlefront 1 from 2004, the original Battlefront. Not too much though, because certain mechanics weren't my favorite. Like you could go prone, which means your character could completely lie down, which I thought was really cool. I don't know why they took that out of the sequel. But there's no sprinting, for example. And I don't know. I still have the game, of course, but I just don't play it as much. It's not as easy to mod on either way. Even just installing mods or implementing mods, it's a little bit harder. But people have created some cool stuff, so I've never even checked out mods for that game, and I probably should, and I probably will at some point. But most of my love goes to the 2005 sequel. I never played Renegade Squadron or Elite Squadron. I know one of those titles used assets from the canceled Free Radical Star Wars Battlefront 3 game. And so I really like the story that, like the campaign that it was going to be implemented for that game, where you follow two clone brothers, and I think they were cloned from a Jedi, and they both fight for the Republic initially, and then as the Galactic Civil War starts and Order 66 is implemented, they eventually split off. One joins the Empire, one joins the Rebellion, and their story kind of continues through the Rebellion and even into the New Republic era. So I think that's a really cool story, and I'm hoping to implement some of those aspects into my new era mod. But I've never had the ability to play either of those Battlefronts either. I still remember when EA released the new Battlefront. I think it was 2015, maybe. And same thing. I mean, I enjoyed it, but very lacking in terms of content. There was no Clone Wars content. It was completely different from the original game. And so while I did enjoy it, I never owned it personally. I definitely wanted to check it out, but I never purchased the game myself. And then same thing when Battlefront 2 EA was released, there was a ton of controversy surrounding that game. I mean, EA has had a reputation of not being the best company anyway. And so that drew me away from that game for a long, long time. But eventually one of my buddies in college, he purchased it, and so I had it at my disposal, and I would be crazy not to play it. And so I went ahead and started messing around with it, and it's pretty fun. I mean, I like it. Definitely a different style, than those early 2000s games, but I enjoy it for the most part. I mean, I try to shy away from that controversy from the initial release, but I mean, I had a good time whenever I would play it with my buddies, so I mean, to me, I guess it's fine. And then the classic collection release. That was that was interesting for sure.
That was definitely something special.
I Something that I do really like about it though is I like the console menu a lot, and I really like that they implemented that even for the PC version, right?
I would have preferred if it would be optional and
True.
it leaves out a few settings which I don't like.
Yeah, and I think there's also other like I don't think you can change the inverted like flight controls for some reason.
Exactly. I think they patched it. I hope they patched it now after so many weeks, but yeah, you never know.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny because I mean everyone's like, well, yeah, the game works fine offline, right? But people bought it for that online capability, right? And same thing, like I have a version of the game that works perfectly fine offline, so I'm probably just gonna stick with that, with what I have.
Especially for the Steam users, it's so cheap to have the original game. So why? What's the point?
Exactly. I understand if maybe you're a console user, say like you have a Nintendo Switch or or a PS5 and you've never been able to play them and you want to get them on there, like go ahead. But I mean, I guess you can't install mods, so you know, I like it on the PC because essentially unlimited free DLCs, really. Like all of this amazing content is put out by the community for free for everyone to play, which I think is incredible. And that's where I like to contribute, even in my smaller, newer mods.
Yeah, that's totally it. That it's basically free content, and that for other game developer studios, it's re-advertisement. I guess without multiplayer and mod support, those games would be long forgotten.
Yeah.
I don't mean they are bad, but those are really the driving forces in the community.
Yeah, exactly. It would be harder for people to keep giving him the love that they can and to keep playing it. Even for me, like I've been a huge Star Wars fan. I'm a big nerd. I love all of that. And I got into Battlefront again, after playing it way back, in 2010 or whatever. I got into it way later because I saw that people were playing Clone Wars, like the TV show mods on Battlefront, and using all these cool characters, all these cool Jedi. And I was like, I want to be doing that. And so I purchased the game again on my PC after, right? So it even got me, it kept me invested into it.
Yeah, totally. I'm on the same side here. I'm playing the game also now since release, since 2005, basically. Not all the time, but every time I see a new mod, a new map, I just try it.
Yeah, me too. And some people like certain aspects than others. I enjoy some mods more than others, but people put hard work into those things and some of them are really cool and I never would have thought that I would have liked it, if I never would have tried it out.
Well, then, coming slowly to a close, the last thing I would like to know basically from you is where can people reach you?
I think the best way to reach me right now would be you can reach out to me on the ModDB page itself, right? I've been replying to comments a little bit less because I have a server now, but I still try to reply to at least people that are having trouble like with the game crashing and stuff, because you never want that to be the case. So on ModDB, whether it's a comment on one of the files or on the main homepage or on an article, or if you even like DM me on ModDB, I would definitely see it. I might take a little bit longer to get back to you, but on the ModDB page, there's a link to my server. It's just the Battlefront Expanded Conflicts Discord server, and I'm much more active on there. So if somebody joins that, and sends me a ping or a friend request or sends me a message, I'm much more likely to see it. And then that way, if they have suggestions or if they can help out in some way, I think that would be the best way to do it to join the server.
Yeah, I totally will link everything in the description here, and maybe some long lost soul of Battlefront 2 modding is finding your mod interesting and joins you. I can't wait to see new versions of it.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for joining, and yeah, I would say this is the part of the video where I open the mic to you. Is there anything you would like to add? Anything I missed?
I guess just, as a disclaimer, it's all made out of love, out for fun, Try not to dwell too much into things like lore accuracy and maybe certain aspects, people like that to be catered a very specific way, it's all in good fun. Like I'll try my best to kind of take suggestions as I can, but at the end of the day, it's made with love. Like, enjoy it as much as you can, have fun, and I'll continue to release content for the community as the months and the years go by, hopefully, and hopefully bring smiles to the players' faces and give them an experience that they haven't had yet with the game.
Well, then, yeah, can't wait to have you back on the channel in the future to talk about upcoming projects and the latest features you added. But until then, I would say that's it for this video. Leave us a comment, tell us what you think about the game, and of course, play the game. Until next time.